Well, let's get some analysis now with Kris Janowski, a spokesperson for the United Nations Human Rights Office. He joins us now from Kiev. Really good to have you with us, Kris. You're in Kiev, the Ukrainian capital, and over the weekend, many Ukrainian Orthodox Christians marked Christmas. This was a period that the Russian President Vladimir Putin had said there would be a ceasefire in fighting across Ukraine. Can you tell us what it's like in Kiev, what it was like over that Christmas period? Was there indeed a cessation in hostilities for that period?
Well, Kiev itself, from what I have seen here, has been quite calm over the past few days. But of course, there had been attacks before, just before. There were a few days with quite intense attacks in Kiev itself, targeting primarily infrastructure, energy supplies, and so on and so forth. But over the past few days, Kiev has been relatively calm. Yet in other parts of Ukraine, we know from media reports, we have not really investigated those situations. There have been attacks. So it's, I would say, a mixed picture.
We also know that the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has accused Russia of war crimes and crimes against humanity. Indeed, its own officials are currently conducting investigations into these alleged crimes. I mentioned you're from the UN Human Rights Office. What is the office doing in Ukraine? What are your activities right now?
We are essentially documenting all kinds of human rights abuses and the human rights situation in the country. We released a report not long ago about the killings committed by Russian Federation troops in certain areas of Ukraine within the first weeks of the attack on Ukraine on February 24th. We also track the number of civilian casualties. At the moment, we know that almost 7,000 people have been killed and many thousands more have been wounded as a result of this conflict. But we know also that this figure is probably very, very low in comparison to the real figure, as we have not had access to certain areas that have been very heavily affected by the fighting, including Mariupol and Kherson and so on and so forth. And in these areas, there are probably heavy casualties. So this war, in addition to essentially wreaking havoc in everybody's life in this country, there's not a single person in Ukraine probably that has not been somehow adversely affected by it. It also has killed many, many thousands of people, and there is no end in sight.
Can you tell us about what you've found so far? Have there been indeed possible human rights violations being committed by either the Ukrainian or the Russian sides?
Well, we have found human rights violations. We have looked at the situation, for example, of prisoners of war, and we have found violations on both sides, both by the Russian Federation and Ukraine, even though the scale of these violations has been much, much greater on the Russian side, in areas occupied by the Russian Federation. But again, often when we release our figures, we put in a word of caution, saying that, in fact, we have not had access to many areas, especially areas controlled by the Russian Federation, where we have had no access whatsoever. And we try to piece together information coming from secondary sources, from survivors, from people who have left areas affected by occupied by the Russians, and so on and so forth. So it's not a complete picture. It is a fairly accurate picture, but it's not a complete picture.
Okay, Kris Janowski from the UN Human Rights Office. We really appreciate your time, and thank you so much again for joining us.